Jennifer Aniston refused to answer Fallon's question, then said what no guest ever dared. Jennifer Aniston stopped answering. Not after a pause. Not after gathering her thoughts. Mid-sentence, with the microphone still live and 300 people watching, she simply stopped. Jimmy Fallon had held up a photograph. He had asked her something in the light, easy way hosts ask questions when they assume the answer will be pleasant. Jennifer looked at the photograph. She set it face down on the desk. Then she looked at Jimmy Fallon and said, clearly and calmly, "I'm not going to answer that." Nobody in the room moved. Nobody in the control room reached for a button or a headset. And then, less than a minute later, she said something that no guest had ever said on that stage. Not in years of guests, not in thousands of interviews, not once. It was a Tuesday night in April 2019. The Tonight Show studio was sold out and warm under the lights, with an audience that had lined up along 49th Street since 2 in the afternoon. Some of them with thermoses, some of them with lawn chairs. Most of them there because they had never in their lives missed an episode and were not about to start now. Jennifer Aniston was there to promote a new project, and by every visible measure, the interview was going exactly the way those interviews go. Relaxed. Funny. Two professionals completely at ease. The kind of conversation that makes an hour feel like 20 minutes. Jimmy was laughing. Jennifer was sharp. The band was loose. The segment producer who had coordinated the booking, a woman who had worked in late-night television for 19 years, said afterward that she'd never seen a guest settle into that chair that quickly. Everything was flowing. Everything was right. The Tonight Show control room still talks about what happened in the 4 minutes that followed. Jimmy reached under the desk and produced a plain white envelope. He held it up with a smile, the way hosts do when they think they already know the answer, and said someone had sent it to the show and that he thought she might want to take a look. Jennifer held out her hand. He opened it first and slid out what was inside. Not a glossy press photograph. Not a production still. Not something cropped and filtered and labeled for a news cycle. Just a photograph. Old, edges soft and worn. The kind of thing that has lived folded inside an envelope for decades, carried from place to place without ever being framed, because the person who kept it didn't need to explain it to anyone else. They simply needed it close. Jennifer looked at it. Her hands went still in her lap. Her face didn't change right away, but the change was already happening beneath it, the way weather is already in a room before anyone has opened a window. Jimmy leaned forward and started to ask his question. Not loud, not dramatic, just a question. Jennifer shook her head once, a small, deliberate motion, and said, "Jimmy, I'm not going to answer that." She set the photograph face down on the desk. Then, after 3 full seconds, she picked it up again. The entire studio froze. No one reached for a phone. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seat. The wrong assumptions landed immediately across the room. Fallon had pushed too far. Something had misfired. A line had been crossed somewhere in the planning. But Jennifer Aniston was not upset. Her voice had been completely controlled. That was exactly what made the moment so strange, not the refusal itself, but the composure underneath it, steady and deliberate. The composure of someone who had decided something privately a long time ago and was only now letting it become visible. She pressed the photograph to her chest. And then she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by her microphone. She said one word. A name. Eleanor. 300 people held their breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1992. Jennifer Aniston wasn't always Jennifer Aniston. Beloved, recognized everywhere she went. The actress who had spent 3 decades becoming one of the most familiar faces in the world. In January of 1992, she was 22 years old, living in a 2-bedroom walk-up in the West Village with a roommate she'd found through a community theater casting board, surviving on what she made waitressing 3 nights a week, and going to auditions that kept almost working. She had booked a short film. She had been called back twice for a pilot that never got picked up. She remembered that it was raining, actually raining, not misting. The heavy kind that made the sidewalks smell like iron. The evening she walked into the West Side Arts Workshop on West 45th Street. Open-door scene study ran on Tuesday nights, no fee. First come seated first. The woman running the class was named Eleanor Ruth Marsh. Eleanor was 64 years old. She had spent 17 years working as a character actress in regional theater across New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, 3 years doing voice work for commercial recordings, and had been teaching acting classes at community workshops since 1978. She was not famous. She had not wanted to be. She had come to the theater originally because she loved it the way some people love a particular room, completely, without needing it to give anything back. She taught without a curriculum, without notes, without anything except a folding chair, and a very precise instinct for what was actually happening in someone's body when they tried to perform. She could tell, usually within 2 minutes, whether a person was acting or living. When Jennifer arrived that Tuesday night, soaking wet and 8 minutes late, Eleanor didn't stop the class. She pointed to an empty chair in the back row and kept talking. They connected over something that had nothing to do with craft or technique. After class, while the other students filed out into the rain, Eleanor opened a folder she kept in a canvas bag and pulled out a photograph. It had been taken by an audience member in 1971 at a small workshop production on West 43rd Street. Eleanor at 43, standing center stage in the middle of a scene, completely unaware that anyone was pointing a camera at her. She placed it in Jennifer's hand and said, "That is what it looks like when you stop trying to be interesting and start being honest. You have that quality. Someone told you that you don't, otherwise you'd already know it." Jennifer didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. Eleanor told her to keep the photograph. She kept it for the next 2 years. She carried it in an envelope inside whatever bag she was using that week. She looked at it before every audition that actually went somewhere. She looked at it the afternoon she made the decision to move to Los Angeles in 1993. She and Eleanor lost touch the way you lose touch when one life accelerates and another stays still. Not by choice, not by neglect, just by the arithmetic of time and distance, and the particular silence that grows between people when one of them becomes unreachable. Fame is the force that carries people away from things they love. It is never anyone's fault. Eleanor went on teaching her Tuesday classes at the same center on West 45th Street, pointing at empty chairs for late arrivals, the same way she always had. She bought a small television for her kitchen and watched it some evenings. She never told anyone she had given the photograph away. 14 months before the Tonight Show appearance, Eleanor received the diagnosis: ovarian stage 4. Her oncologist gave her 7 months. By the time she reached month 5, it was clear that estimate had been optimistic. Her daughter helped her write a letter to the Tonight Show's booking office. She included a second print she had made from the original 1971 negative and kept framed on her kitchen wall. At the bottom of the letter she wrote only, "I don't need anything. I only want to be in the room one more time." Jennifer Aniston's assistant called the number Eleanor had included within 16 hours. The arrangement was made in complete secrecy. The Tonight Show staff was told only that a specific guest would be seated in the third row that night. Jennifer had made one request when she spoke to the producers by phone. "I want her to feel like a person, not a moment." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Behind the scenes, Jennifer Aniston had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had not told Jimmy Fallon what the photograph was. She had asked for the envelope to be placed on his desk as a prop, without any explanation at all. What neither Jimmy nor the producers knew was that Jennifer had been carrying the original 1971 photograph, the one Eleanor had placed in her hands in a rain-soaked classroom on 45th Street 31 years earlier, in the inner pocket of her jacket, since she had walked into the building 4 hours ago. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Jennifer Aniston held the photograph with both hands and looked at Jimmy and said, "The question you want to ask me is where this came from. And the answer is that it came from the woman sitting in the third row, who handed it to me in 1992 in a room on 45th Street, when I had almost nothing left and didn't know it yet." She turned in her chair. She looked at the third row, and Eleanor Ruth Marsh, 71 years old, thinner than she had been, rose from her seat. Jennifer came around the desk without hesitating. Jimmy Fallon had already risen to his feet, but he understood, the way you sometimes understand things without being told, that this was not his moment to lead. Jennifer walked to the edge of the stage. Eleanor moved down the center aisle slowly, her daughter steadying her by the elbow. The audience still didn't fully know what they were watching, only that a woman they recognized was moving toward a woman they didn't, and that it mattered in a way they couldn't yet name. Jennifer reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and pulled out the original photograph. She unfolded it carefully, the way you unfold something that has been folded for a very long time, the paper soft at the creases, worn through from decades of handling. "You kept it," Eleanor said. Her hands were trembling. "Every single day," Jennifer said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by the stage microphone. Eleanor looked down at the photograph, then up again. "I was only a drama teacher. You were the first person who ever told me I had it." Jennifer took both of Eleanor's hands in hers, holding them carefully. "And I never got to say thank you." Eleanor shook her head. Tears were moving down her face. "I didn't want you to know I was sick." "Why?" "Because I didn't want pity." Eleanor tightened her fingers around Jennifer's. "I wanted to be in the room one more time. That was all I needed." Jimmy Fallon climbed over his desk somewhere in the middle of all of it. He stood at the edge of the stage with one hand pressed over his mouth, unable to say anything useful. He managed, barely audible, "Folks. I think we need to just let this happen." The director did not cut to commercial. The cameraman closest to the stage floor did not pull back. Questlove had set his drumsticks down on the snare and was standing up from behind his kit, looking toward the stage. The standing ovation began somewhere in the center of the audience and moved outward in every direction. Slowly, the way a wave moves, not from force but from understanding. Jennifer placed the original photograph in Eleanor's hands and closed her fingers around it. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Eleanor Ruth Marsh passed away on a Thursday morning in June, 11 weeks after that Tuesday night. Jennifer Aniston was not working that week. She was not in Los Angeles. The second print, the one Eleanor had kept framed on the wall of her kitchen in Queens, was brought to the hospital room in Eleanor's final days and placed on the windowsill where the afternoon light came in. Her daughter said she looked at it most mornings. After Eleanor's death, her daughter sent Jennifer a handwritten note along with the photograph Eleanor had carried to the show that night. Jennifer had a copy made from the 1971 negative. It hangs in her home now, in the hallway she walks through every morning on her way out the door. It is not labeled. It has no caption. Anyone who doesn't know the story would see only an old photograph of a woman on a stage who doesn't know she is being watched. That is the part Eleanor always understood. The truest things never perform for the camera.